Welcome, everybody. It is my absolute great pleasure to introduce today Rich Kliman and Scott Edwards, the winners of the IDEA Award for 2020. They don't need an introduction, but I am going to be very core here, and I'm going to just give them all the time that they deserve to present the work that they have been doing. I want you to think what you were doing in 2001 and 2002. It was 20 years ago. Rich, Rich and Scott started uh, a program to foster the development of undergrads and to mentor them uh, really and bring them to the tissue of the evolution meeting. This program has been going on for 20 solid years. And that's simply one of the longest programs that actually we can think in the country to try to incorporate undergrads and bring diversity into our fields. So with that, no further ado, I will just bring Rich and Scott to tell us what this program has been about and what they see that is going to happen in the future. I'm very excited. Welcome.
Hi everybody, I'm Rich Kliman at Cedar Crest College, and today Scott Edwards and I are going to be speaking with you about undergraduate diversity and evolution, history, impact, and future potential of the program. It's fair to say that in 2001 when Scott piloted this program, and in 2002 when I asked him if I could be part of it, that we couldn't know the long-term prospects for the program. We couldn't know its staying power. We didn't know where the funding was going to come from in the long term. And we didn't know if the community was going to embrace it. And it's extremely gratifying to see that has been the case, that our scientific societies have taken over some of the financial responsibilities for this program, and that our community has really stepped up and embraced this program. And we certainly couldn't have known that our societies would create the IDEA Award to recognize individuals and groups who are contributing to diversity and access and equity and inclusion. And it's extremely humbling to actually be one of the first recipients of this award. And it's also really important to know that this program isn't the work of two people. So I want to certainly right off the bat make sure that a few people are recognized for this. Jory Weintraub, Alexa Warwick, and Louise Mead, who have really helped to propel this program. So I certainly want to thank the selection committee for giving us this opportunity to speak with you about this program and about other really important topics in diversity, equity, inclusion, access, and to allow us to perhaps have a robust discussion as part of the Q&A that's going to go along with this talk today. So I'm going to be focusing a little bit on the overall structure of the program and particularly the mentoring component. And then Scott will provide some more information on the history of the program, the demographics of the participants, and we're both also going to be sharing our thoughts that relate to diversity more broadly in our field. So the basic components of the program are financial support for travel, registration, meals, and lodging. All of the costs for the students are covered by the program. There are career development activities, panels, speakers, workshops. Louise Mead in particular has taken the lead in organizing these workshops. They now happen the morning of the first day of the conference, prior to the opening reception. The students present their research. There are social events, ice cream socials, breakfasts, other ways for the program participants to interact with our community. And of course, there's the mentoring program. If you hear some dogs and such in the background, I don't think those are mine, but sometimes they might be. So there have been 285 participants in this program since 2004. Now I said it was piloted in 2001, and then we had our first sort of official year with NSF support in 2003. And I'm saying since 2004, that's really when the mentoring program got going. There might be a little bit of information on the program from 2003, but it's almost certainly on one of these, and I don't have it. But since 2004, there have been 13 cohorts of students. So 285 students total. They've been mentored by 341 mentors, who are actually 232 distinct individuals, because many of our mentors have actually come back to multiple meetings. And those 285 students have come from 149 distinct institutions. Now, the most they could have come from are 285 institutions, so 149 is pretty good. And you can see in this histogram that the vast majority of institutions historically in this program have sent one student. 30 or so institutions have sent 2 students, and a few institutions have sent more. 11 institutions have sent 65 of the students, but another 138 institutions have sent the other 220. And so it's a pretty good mix of institutions. If we look at a diversity index of institutions, Shannon Weiner diversity is 4.77. That gives us an effective number of institutions of 118.1. However you slice it, the students aren't all coming from just a handful of institutions. Now, does this mean that we're really reaching students everywhere, that we're reaching all students who could benefit from this program? That's hard to say, right? And that's actually something that I think we need to look at hard. But 149 institutions is certainly a pretty good start. Now, in terms of the mentoring part of this program, each participant is assigned 2 mentors. We expect that the mentors will introduce themselves prior to the meeting. They'll reach out to their mentees. They'll meet their mentees at the opening mixer. And then they're going to spend half a day attending talks with the mentees, right? Demystifying the subjects, probably having a meal with them that day. They'll attend the poster session, the social events. And in general, there's going to be a connection at the meeting. There's somebody that the participants can reach out to when they have questions, when they have concerns. So we've had 232 mentors. 65 have been repeat mentors. You can see the majority have been a mentor at one meeting. And I know that that could look like they were mentors and said, no, not again. But I really don't think that that's what this means. We actually have a really good steady influx of new mentors. So of course in 2004, they were all new mentors. And the first few years, you'd expect that. But in fact, over the course of these 13 cohorts, we've always had, you can see, a minimum of 10 and usually, closer to 15 or 20 new mentors participating in this program. And that's really great to see. Having said that, I do want to take the time to recognize a handful of individuals who've actually been really committed to this program as mentors. So Josh, Ben, Jeremy, Kelsey, Tracy, Corey, Lucy, definitely thank you for being a participant in this program 4 times. Luana, Muhammad, Nicole, mentored at 5 different meetings. Sam Price has done this 7 times. And Maria Uribe, 10 times. That's 10 times out of 13 cohorts. Right? Almost every meeting where we've had this program, Maria's been a mentor. And so to all of you, definitely thank you. And the ones who have mentored once or twice, again, definitely thank you. It's really a sign that our community is embracing this program, that so many people are participating. But there's even more evidence for that. So I've said, our societies have embraced this program. There's the financial commitment. The engagement by our community is reliable, it's sustainable. In 2019, 201 of you volunteered to be mentors in this program. Okay, anybody can check the box, I suppose, on the registration site and say, I'm happy to be a mentor. And when 201 of you volunteer, there's really about a 7 out of 8 chance that you're not going to be a mentor. We're looking for about 25 mentors. And I have to tell you that 2019 was really hard. This incredible response to the call for mentors. And so I first looked, I wanted to make sure that, we had a few of our very experienced mentors as part of this program, and we did. There were 3 volunteers who had actually been undergraduates in the program before, so they were automatic. And then what I did was I just randomized the entire list and started going through one at a time, looking you up, right? Going to see what your current research is on. And if it was a pretty good disciplinary match to a participant in the program, I signed you up. Now, that's the way we have been assigning mentors historically in this program. It's been by having similar research interests. And this is something that actually is now in discussion. Should we be giving participants in these mentoring programs more say in how they want to be mentored? What are their priorities in the choice of a mentor? But we've been using this disciplinary match. And as I said, anybody can volunteer. But everyone who I asked, everyone who was on my list to be selected as a mentor said yes. And I have to tell you, I checked all 201 because it was a weird year and there were a lot of you who volunteered who do research in areas that were simply unrelated to what that year's cohort of students were interested in. But everyone who was asked said yes. So statistically, that's an estimated back-out rate of 0.0%. The maximum plausible parametric back-out rate is 16.7%. I'll take that. And this is a really great sign of our community supporting not only diversity, but supporting the participation of undergraduates in our annual meeting. Those of you who have been involved in this program believe in the importance of having undergraduates and having, in particular, a diverse cohort of undergraduates present at the evolution meeting. So I imagine that when the societies decided to have a plenary address that relates to diversity, equity, access, and inclusion, they expected us to do more with this time than talk about the particular initiative that we've been recognized for. And there are some things that I think that we should be talking about, and I know Scott has others that he's going to bring up as well. But everything that I'm going to say now in my last few minutes is predicated by the assumption that what we do matters. And I'll just say it, I really don't care if the homeopathy, intelligent design, and white nationalist communities are diverse. But what we do in science and evolutionary biology, it matters. We make discoveries about the operation of the natural world. And we don't just tell each other about those discoveries. Our discoveries are applied to problems. adaptation to climate change, epidemiology, invasive species. We can name quite a number of real problems that our society faces and that count on what we're doing. And if we do believe that we're going to be able to better address these problems by having a more diverse community, we have to make sure that we're actually succeeding. So when we look at how we recruit students into the program and into our broader community, I think the first thing we have to make sure of is that the diversity that we're seeing is not an illusion. And what I mean by that is we can easily actually construct diversity at a small scale. With sufficient resources, we can put together a cohort of 20 to 25 participants that will be diverse. But does that diversity, whether it's in UDE or any other initiatives that we have that are high impact initiatives, that are certainly valuable to all of the students who are participating in those initiatives at the time, but can we be confident that what we're doing is translating to diversity in our fields? So I'm going to make an assertion, and not everybody has to agree with me on this, and I could be wrong about it, but I'm going to make an assertion that diversity is an outcome. That is, diversity is the natural outcome of broad-scale access and equity. And that it's access and equity that really should be our focus. How do we improve access and equity? And so when you look at our programs, whether they're UDE or other programs that engage undergraduates, we should be asking ourselves first, who are we reaching? Is everybody who could benefit from participation in the programs aware of the programs? And after that, who are we deciding to support? And we have to be striving to improve access and equity if our goal is to diversify our community. So the last thing that I want to say before passing this off to Scott is I think that it's actually really important that we be able to articulate the case for diversity. Probably everybody, or just about everybody who's attending this talk today, sees the intrinsic value of diversity. But we have to acknowledge that not everyone agrees. We have to acknowledge that not everyone sees intrinsic value in diversity. And while we may be confident that diversity, first of all, is right, and that diversity is good for science, that's not going to be obvious to everybody. So how do we convince them that diversity is important? Well, I think one of the most common arguments is that when we have diversity, we have more ideas, more insights, more ways of approaching problems. And scientists solve problems, right? So having more ideas and more insights and more approaches should lead to greater success in science. I think this is probably true, but it's not going to be obvious to everybody. But if we go back to the assertion that I made earlier, which is that diversity is an outcome. It's an outcome of equity and access. When we have equity and access, we're engaging more people. We'll have diversity, but we'll have engaged more people. And simply engaging more people who have the ability, who have the talent to approach problems and to look for solutions and to find solutions, then we're increasing the chance that someone is going to solve the problem. So when we don't have diversity, we're not engaging as many people. And we're not as likely to solve problems. I think it's a simple argument. It's not the only argument for diversity, but I think it's a simple argument that works. Right. So thank you for giving me the chance to speak with you about this. I'm looking forward to the Q&A. And now let me pass this off to Scott Edwards, who actually started the Undergraduate Diversity program back in 2001. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Scott Edwards here. Great to follow up on Rich's comments. And I just want to thank the selection committee for awarding us the IDEA Award for 2020. And very excited to be here at the Evolution meetings. I'll go ahead and share my screen here. And yeah, just to continue on with the Undergraduate Diversity program. And what I'll do is just tell you a few more perspectives on the program and then segue into some broader issues about diversity and inclusion with regard to evolution. One of my favorite pictures for the program is here. You can see one of our longtime collaborators, Jory Weintraub there, and just a great bunch of very eager budding evolutionists. Several of our program friends, Tracy Heath and Michelle Nisiguchi, are in there. Just really great to see these folks who've helped us over the years. And again, just to formally thank our collaborators, Jory, Louise Mead, and Alexa Warwick. And of course, Louise has worked with a number of other folks at Michigan State in the most recent incarnation of the program. And so, yeah, this program just began very, very small. And I was at the University of Washington at the time. And I think we got a year of sort of pilot funding from NSF just to see how it might work. That was back in 2001. And then we got a longer term grant to bring in about 20 undergraduates to the evolution meetings. And as Rich has described, you know, there's lots of activities, mentoring, networking. And of course, one of the things we've learned from the participants is that building that network, that community, has been one of the most important aspects of the program. The funding segued in about 2006 to Nescent. And of course, Alan Rodrigo, the director of Nescent, was a longtime fan of our program, really supported it a lot. And then we most recently have been supported by Beacon, another NSF-funded initiative, and one that Luis and Alexa and many others have helped support. And you know, Beacon was just so effective in so many ways in bringing in diverse participants into evolutionary biology. Beacon in itself, I think, is a great model for how we can be more inclusive in evolutionary biology. And just thinking a little bit about, you know, our main focus throughout the program has been, you know, obviously promise and letters of recommendation and ethnicity. Of all the dimensions of diversity, I say, you know, we've probably sort of emphasized ethnicity foremost. And you know, it's, if you compare, for example, the demographics of awardees with those who applied to the program, they're subtly different. There's quantitative differences. It's not a wholesale difference. And the truth is, we would have loved to give fellowships to everyone who applied. And you know, it's worth thinking about how far can focusing on ethnicity take us, as I hope to argue later. You know, there are lots of other dimensions of diversity, especially there's geographic diversity, and there's also economic diversity, something that we probably haven't tapped into substantially yet. The program did grow over the years. This sort of gives you a trajectory of it, and you can see the applications per year in blue and the admissions in red. We basically had about 20 admits every year on average, not counting those years where no one was sent. And then we have, and in some years, we'd have over 80 applicants. And so that it became more challenging, I think, to figure out whom to admit, since, all the applicants are certainly deserving. Now, the years where we didn't send anyone were, as you might expect, years where we were overseas. And, it's a good discussion to ask, well, should we try to bring in money to send undergraduates overseas? In some ways, yes, certainly can be a galvanizing experience. In other ways, for many of these participants, the evolution meetings were their very first scientific conference. And it's so empowering for the students to see that there is a community out here that is passionate about evolutionary biology. It's not just that they've gone off track, the lone student in their classroom interested in evolution. There's a whole community out there. And so the international experience is probably less important, I would argue, than going to a vibrant conference. Now, you might be asking, well, who is the lone student who got to go to, the lucky student who got to go to New Zealand? And I think she knows who she is. Of course, it's Nancy Chen, professor at University of Rochester, whom I was fortunate to be mentoring at the time, and who now is a very prominent member of the evolutionary community, and as important, very active in diversity initiatives. She's on the diversity committee of the American Society of Naturalists. You can see here a graph of some of the impacts the program has had. A lot of our participants have gone on to get PhDs. It's super exciting. Now, the fact that that percentage is higher than those to whom we didn't award participation in the program, well, of course, we can claim that it was our program that got those participants to get PhDs. Of course, that's not true. We may well have been selecting also for participants that had a lot of promise to begin with. Nonetheless, it's very exciting that 68% of our participants did go on to get PhDs or are working on it. Many are currently still in academia in some capacity, and that's of course a good thing, although we know that academia isn't the only thing one can do to be effective or to use evolutionary biology. And of course, in the last column on the right, you can see that evolution is important to over 50% of the current positions of participants. And so that's really great. It speaks to the importance of evolutionary biology in diverse careers in and outside of academia. I thought I would tell you a little bit about my impressions from last summer, where many of you may have heard, I took a bicycle trip across the country now, and those will feed in, I think, to the experience at the Evolution Society in important ways. The myth, of course, is that I, rode across the country in protest along with everyone else protesting in marches around the country. That, of course, isn't true. The truth is more that I was taking advantage of the hiatus in activities to fulfill a lifelong dream. This is something that apparently was picked up by a Nature news briefing. My friend Juha Merila from University of Helsinki, and actually currently from University of Hong Kong, notified me of this, that this quote was picked up. It was very inspiring. But it took on a bit of a political bent as I continued my journey, because I donned these Black Lives Matter signs. And so, yeah, my message to you is that if you want to, increase diversity and evolution, get on your bike, ride across country, and put Black Lives Matter signs on your bike. Anyway, about a week into the trip, I donned these signs for a variety of reasons, mostly to think, how can I contribute to the rage that's going around the country? And it opened up a lot of really interesting perspectives and conversations that I wouldn't have had on the trip. Here's my route. I started in Plum Island, Mass, June 6th, 2020, and ended up in Sunset Beach, Oregon about 76 days later. And you can see I took a northern route, and it's actually interesting to lay over this route the geography of participants in our program. So what you see in this inset here is where our participants have come from over the past 18 or so years. And what I notice is this big gap in sort of the montane West, Idaho, Montana, Wyoming, the Dakotas, Nebraska. These are rural areas. I spent most of last summer cycling through them. And it tells me that we need to do a better job as a society in reaching out, not just to diverse ethnicities, but to diverse economics. In particular, we need to reach out to rural America. There's a lot of rural America does not have access to the kinds of resources and the kinds of questions that we think about as evolutionary biologists. And my hunch is that there's a lot of really exciting connections to be made with rural America. And many of you may have interacted in profitable ways with rural America. After all, they've grown up in closer to nature than many of us urbanites have. And as a result, may have some really interesting perspectives on our field and how organisms thrive in nature. So that's something to think about. Now, most of rural America, as my bicycle trip illustrated, is white. Although, I did cycle through lots of Native American reservations, but as a whole, I only had a single substantive conversation with a single person of African American descent. You can see Lenny here from Roosevelt, Washington. Had a great talk with him, and I had great talks with everyone. But it was clear that it's heavily white in rural America. But that doesn't mean we should neglect it. There's lots of important perspectives that we need to incorporate there. Lots of divergent views, not all of which I shared, but lots of generosity and positivity. Lots of encounters with facts and that I didn't think were true. Lots of misinformation out there, but lots of compassion and lots of interest in what it's like to be an ornithologist in my case. So yeah, lots of important dialogues to have with rural America. And in particular, I went through lots of areas where farming was very intensive, lots of areas with extraordinary infrastructure of agriculture, and lots of areas that were thriving on the one hand, you can see by these wind turbines, but also with degrading infrastructure, such as this rusting silo on the right. And so what impressed me was just the scale of this infrastructure and how much the imprint of agriculture on our landscape. And so, evolution, of course, is extremely important for processes in agriculture. And it was interesting to think about those connections. One thing I did learn was, where did those cylindrical hails of bay come from? This was something that a city boy like myself never knew. And well, here I am in South Dakota, seeing it for right before my eyes. Again, I think there's a lot of two-way exchanges of information and knowledge that can come with engagement with rural America. Black Lives Matter, of course, saw lots of very poignant expressions of outrage and compassion there. But it's challenging. There were lots of communities that I cycled through for whom Black Lives Matter essentially meant looting and mayhem, which it's just unfortunate. We get so much of our information from the news, and depending on who we listen to, it colors our view of what's actually going on. And so it behooves us, most importantly, just to sit down, take the time and to listen, to have conversations. I think this sort of empathy is the kind of thing that we need to do as a country, but I would also say, yeah, it's super important at the evolution meetings, just to take the time listen and engage with people that are different from you. And so, we all need to think about our own communities, our local communities. How diverse are they? Have I interacted recently with folks that are really different from me? These are important goals I think we all share. And when I went to Portland, it was just all the rage that had been bubbling up over the summer sort of spilled out. And I also saw, just the stark contrast between rural America and urban America. In many ways, I think that's the biggest divide in our country. It's not so much black, white, or other ethnicities, but urban versus rural. Of course, there's a lot of co-varying factors. And I will say that, being trained as an evolutionary biologist is, a great education, how to think about these very complex multivariate problems that are confronting our society. I cycled for many weeks, and people were even asking me as I was cycling, well, are you raising money for something? And sadly, I had to say no. And it took Sally Otto, who just emailed me one day as I was on the road, said, hey, we should raise some money. And I just can't thank Sally enough for getting it together. It's been very a lot of fun to do this. And I think the current total of our campaign now is $61,000 or so. I think thank you to all of you in the audience who made contributions to this fund. I think this is something that all of us can drum up support for. And as a card-carrying evolutionary biologist, of course, I had to take the extra 20 miles out of my way to visit the home of evolutionary biologist Sewell Wright. He hails from Galesburg, Illinois. I thank Noah Rosenberg of Stanford for notifying me of this as he watched me trek across the US. And I can say, though, however, that Carl Sandburg, the poet, is way more famous in Galesburg than Sewell Wright is. I had to take a lot of time to find Sewell Wright's house, which you see here on the left, and the little the marking on his in front of his house on the right. So Philip Green Wright was Sewell's father, and he actually helped Carl Sandburg publish his poem. So there's some interesting connections there. But anyway, lots of small towns with unexpected relevance to evolutionary biology. So, how can we all contribute to diversity? This, of course, is a question that all of us are engaged in. And I'm sure, like me, you've been involved with scores and scores of diversity meetings. How can we think about diversity? And, I've sort of put a fairly standard list here in front of you. I think that hopefully the events of last summer jolted all of us. We cannot go forward with business as usual as we have. We need to think outside the box, and we need to value efforts to diversify our field of evolutionary biology. And so, this is by no means a complete list. And many of you, we need you to share your ideas with all of us so we can really be effective at this really important effort. One of the first things we can do is simply to educate ourselves about why is evolutionary biology not as diverse as it could be. And so I just point you to this article by my colleague, Joe Graves, who has a really unique perspective on this question, who, having been arguably, the first African-American evolutionary biologist, in modern times. Might be able to point to others earlier in the 20th century, but Joe has a really unique perspective on this question. So I would encourage you to read his article, but also to read the growing number of resources out there that can educate all of us as to how we can be more inclusive. getting involved in society diversity committees is another important next step. And I just went to the respective websites and put the names up on the screen here. You know, there are lots of encouraging signs, I would say. You know, I've been coming to the evolution meetings for, you know, since before my PhD in 1992. So, you know, it's probably been since 1990, which makes it, you know, 30 odd years. And the evolution meetings have become more diverse. You know, I think we still have a lot of work to do, but there are a lot of exciting events, lots of people of color getting faculty positions across the country as evolutionary biologists, some of them here on this screen, and lots of folks who have been privileged, you know, contributing to the effort. And so, you know, getting involved, keeping the networks open, communicating, helping young folks improve their networks. This is going to be a win-win for everyone. And I think many of you appreciate, you know, tangibly how diverse perspectives can improve our science. I think we have some great examples of that from the literature. I think of one paper that I won't show on the screen here, but my colleague, my ornithologist colleague, Kevin Omland from the University of Maryland, Baltimore County, led a very important study showing that, you know, as women came into the field of animal behavior, they expanded on the questions that ornithologists were asking about the function of birdsong and mating systems. That's just one small example of how increasing diversity changes the questions that we ask as evolutionary biologists. And so lots of opportunities, lots of chances to think more broadly and to get more involved in this really important effort. So again, just a thank you to all the people over the years who've helped with this with this program. Certainly it wasn't all Rich and I, but it's been really, really rewarding. I think, you know, one of the main reasons I went on that cycle trip last summer is because the evolution meetings weren't happening, because, you know, I try to make them. And so it's been a great community for me. And let's just keep up the pressure to make it more diverse in the years ahead. So thank you very much. And I'm not sure if Rich and I will be answering questions, but if we are, we'd love to do so. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Scott. Thank you, Rich. This was absolutely illuminating. I have a couple of questions for you that the audience has been posting on the virtual site. So I will read them, and I will then, we will go to the two, and I want to encourage the audience to keep posting questions. We have some time to just keep discussing these topics here that are very important. Scott, you saw the land. You went through essentially really, really coast to coast. And one of the questions that actually is coming from the audience, from Nancy Chen, is, well, how do you really engage rural communities into our community of evolution? You point the finger on the issue, and is that they may not be exposed to the same questions that we are all the time, but that there is certainly an enormous amount of talent that is on tap. After seeing the country, what do you like? Do you have any ideas on how to engage and how to actually bring them into the fold of what we do?
Yeah, that's a interesting question and a tough one. I mean, I know that a lot of you know, a lot of schools, colleges, like where I am at Harvard, you know, they spend a lot of effort in outreach to rural communities, and you know, I don't have any silver bullets or any exceptional knowledge. I will say that, it often involves basically going there. I think something as simple as having a representative from your school or from the society go to rural communities to talk to undergraduates who just may not be connected to this national network. I think that that could be huge. And so much of individuals' trajectory, it's the result of their network. And if they know folks out there and they say, there's opportunities for research or wherever, or for presenting work, that's they're likely to take them up once they know about them. Now, a big challenge, and Rich may have some comments on this as well, is that, a lot of folks, whether because they're in a rural community or maybe they have special family connections, it's hard for them to travel. And that, I think, is, something that we need to think about. It's not financially, but just sort of getting away for a REU experience or something like that. So we need to think about ways to, in case it's necessary, to bring the research to them, perhaps remotely. Rich, I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
No, I think that's an important point, though, about bring the research to them. And there's an interesting statistic that I saw a few years ago that actually kind of shocked me, and it had to do with where students go to college. And when students are surveyed about what's most important to them in picking colleges, geography, they say, is nothing, right? 20% say that geography's being close to home, for instance, is important to them, and yet 80% go to college within 50 miles of where they've grown up. So whether it's important to them or not, that still is this this outcome. And so that means that students, by and large, are going to college where they're from, or not too far from that. And so this idea that we can bring students from rural areas and they'll just come out to where the research is happening, I don't think is realistic. So I don't have the answer, but I think that that's something that we should be paying attention to.
Yeah, that's one thing I saw last summer, is just people's conception of what it means to go away from their family. It means very different things. I met this one guy who, his big lifetime trip, he was living in Iowa, was, to go to Minneapolis. That was it. And, he was very proud of that. And so I think people's conception of going far away, even for a limited time, is very, very different depending on who you're talking to.
So would it be accurate to say that we're at a juncture point, that we have all the infrastructure that we have set up for the last year to try to interact with each other and keep business just going? That maybe this is the way to actually reach the communities that actually don't usually come to what we do?
I don't know about you, Rich. I do think last summer was impactful. I mean, I think, hard to know where it's going to end up and how much change will actually come, but I do think people are thinking more about it now, for sure. Be interesting to hear from the audience about whether folks think it. Maybe we can do a Zoom poll. Who thinks last summer was impactful?
I will keep going with the questions where we think this, and actually there is some discussion in the live chat. I think that this is a great question. If you could duplicate yourselves, and it's coming from our very own Brian that is in two places at once. If you could duplicate yourselves and make an additional program, what would you do? For example, he brings a couple of examples, like bringing more K-12 teachers to our meetings, outreach to farmers on evolution, pre-health students. I mean, I think that the point that he's hitting is that there is a limited time. There is a limited time of amount of effort that one can put, and sometimes we just have to do the thing that we want to. But if you could, what would be the other thing that you would actually set up to do?
Rich, do you want to take that? Or?
Well, I can start. I mean, so the good news is that we don't have to duplicate ourselves, because there are actually a lot of people now who are getting involved. You know, and so we have, of course, we've been working on the expansion of the program in general, but it's an interesting kind of question to start asking about what other kinds of programs we could be doing that would be impactful, like bringing in K-12 teachers. I think there are many things beyond an undergraduate program that we could be doing that would be contributing to diversity.
Yeah, and of course, I mean, the evolution meetings, I think, have done a really great job in expanding our impact. And, you know, it's for, I don't know, probably at least 15 years now, they've been meeting with local educators, and the education committees of various societies have really ramped up a lot. And there was a really useful NSF workshop, maybe this spring sometime, put together by Leslie Rissler, winner of the Gould Award this year, Stephen Jay Gould Award. And, you know, there's some really good models out there. For example, the Ecological Society of America, I think, is arguably just doing an order of magnitude more than what we've been doing, or the society in general has been doing. So, and we have a lot to learn from other societies. And you know, I think the word hopefully is out that, you know, NSF really wants to fund this stuff. And so if any of you out there have ideas, go for it. Talk to Leslie or other NSF program officers, because there's a lot of interest there.
Great. This is actually very illuminating. Can I build up on another question, on another idea that actually was bubbling here? And this question is coming from Kathy Rushworth, who is the co-chair of the Diversity Committee at SSC. And we know that there is a perception of conflict between religion and evolutionary biology. And that is a barrier for the inclusion of communities that have higher rates of communist belief, like of religious belief. I know that, for example, coming from Colombia. Do you think that this also applies to rural communities? This perceived divide?
You know, I really want to talk to some sociologists that actually study this stuff. That's a really good question. I think that there is a lot of skepticism out there about intellectualism and science in general. And whether that comes from kind of religious standpoints or just sort of skepticism about those smart people that live back east kind of thing, I don't really know. We know there have been some really powerful bridges built with the religious community, like E.O. Wilson's book about you know, reaching out to the religious community in the name of conservation. And so, you know, evolution, it's a pretty foreign idea to many people in the U.S. especially. Although, gosh, if as we heard from some of the symposia here at this meeting, you know, if COVID wasn't the best real-time illustration of evolution in action, I don't know what is. And so I would love, you know, the famous statistic about what was it, 41 or 47% of people in the US don't believe in evolution. I would love that survey to be retaken now. Who knows, maybe a higher percentage would, because it's happening right before our eyes.
Yeah, I'm gonna ask this question that is coming from Manasi Waratunga, and this is about this is a person that actually comes from Sri Lanka, and they are telling me that actually they never knew that societies and programs like this existed, right? And that seems to be the case in Sri Lanka. Given that actually you have been seeing the transformation of the society from the lens of actually seeing and lifting undergrads, what suggestions do you have about actually raising awareness and just really getting societies and programs like this into countries that are not the United States? I think that this is a fantastic question that just speaks to the role of scientific societies in the modern scientific world, right?
Well, and I think that actually, I mean, for certainly undergraduate diversity and evolution is now not restricted the way that it had been to students who are studying in the U.S. Because of the societies actually now contributing, the lion's share of the support. And so the societies are able to do some things, right, that we're not always able to do, and there are restrictions on the ways that we can use funds. And so the last few cohorts of the program actually started to include undergraduates from other countries explicitly. And part of the question, I think, has been how we can continue to do all of the things that we've been trying to do with the program while growing it, to provide opportunities also for students who are going to increase the diversity of our community, because they are in fact from other countries in the US.
Yeah, and I think that's a really interesting question, and a complicated one. And so, for example, I mean, we know that racism plays out, basically in every country across the world, right? In other words, whether it's color differences or caste differences or who knows what, it plays out. Now, as Rich said, NSF money, I think, at least at some level, is, focused on US students. And it's also the case that, the federal government has their sort of official list of sort of who's considered a minority or not. And I think that list, this is a whole nother conversation, but that list, it partly was originated as a means of redressing past historical discrimination. Now, I think that diversity has many dimensions. There's diversity of US folks, there's diversity in terms of international folks, and then there's all the racism that we know plays out all over the world, not just in the US. And so, how to honor all those dimensions, I think, is the challenge. And yeah, it's no easy answers. And there's some very interesting discussions, I think, to be had about how folks from all over the world can help, in this effort, whether people of color or not. And so, yeah, I think there's some really, really interesting discussions to be had. So.
Thank you for that answer. I want to close this with a question from my own, and is, where do you see this program going for the next few years, which hopefully we will still have? What would you like to see this program become?
Great question. We're Luis, Mead, and Rich and I, we're talking, but we, hopefully we can ramp it up. Yeah, there's a lot of potential, I think, and again, looking to programs like the SEEDS program, is that what it's called at ESA? I think is a great idea. Obviously the number of students we could touch, I think, could grow a lot. I think the quality of the mentorship, we could do year-round kinds of engagement activities. I think of other programs like the Doris Duke Conservation Scholars Program, there's about 5 programs around the US. Those are amazing. I mean, the way they engage the students all year round, and all that takes money. But I like I said, I really think NSF and other places are very excited to support these. So it's at this point, it's just a matter of us putting pen to paper and submitting something. Rich, do you have any comments?
Yep, got it. Right. Not a lot. I mean, yeah, as you pointed out, I mean, Louise and there are others now who are participating, and we've had some meetings over the last year that have involved some members of the diversity committees and others who are excited about putting together a proposal to actually not just expand the program, but to extend it into academic years. And there's also been a lot of discussion about what we want to see in a mentoring program. And one of the things that I mentioned about giving students a greater say in what they want from their mentor. or their mentors when they participate in programs like this. As I said, we've been mainly focusing on sort of disciplinary matches, but there are a lot of other things that we should probably be considering as we go forward.
Well, thank you for that answer. I want to close just saying, Rich and Scott, I'm going to take the liberty of just thanking you from the whole community, because this program has affected, at this point, just generations of biologists. I personally think that this has such a big footprint and such a big effect in our community that the consequences will just be really and truly long lasting already. And with that, I will let you go.
Thank you, Daniel. Thank you.
Thanks, Daniel.